All right, we're all set to rock and roll. Thanks, Jess and Thatcher, for some of the pre-flight stuff here. I see Jeff joined us also, so that's cool. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. I'm just going to bump up the volume here just so we get more remote folks. You want to just say hey one more time?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty awesome.
Hey.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad everybody's on. This Tech Talk actually started out just thinking about, obviously doing some pairing with some freely available functionality in VS Code. And while I was coming up with some ideas, it also kind of led me down to a higher path of collaboration also. So we'll have a few things to talk about, and specifically remote folks, I'd love it if you'd want to jump in and interject later in the conversation when things are popping up as well, just because I'm hoping to cover a couple key things for collaborating here. So with that, let's get started. The first thing that I'll mention is that I have to already start off with a mea culpa about the title here. As it turns out, the whole concept of Visual Studio Team Services, or VSTS, is no longer a thing. In fact, it's actually Azure DevOps. So that led me to the next part of like, well, let's change the title a bit. And if you mention Azure, you might get some mixed reactions in the room, but I'm going to do my best to not only make that part of the presentation fairly painless and hopefully enjoyable, but really just wanting to settle into the main thing that we're trying to accomplish, which is really just, we're trying to do things on a variety of fronts, right? We've got folks collaborating on code. We've got people that are, off-head clients that might want to jump in. It's a whole bunch of different scenarios to consider. So when we're thinking about that, if you start small and think kind of based, here just with what we have initially in the office, or even for, folks that are working at clients or whatever, we're doing a lot of collaboration, obviously, with pairing stations and laptops, a variety of people off-site. But one of the things I think that it's easy to kind of overlook are the just the considerations that we need to sort of bear in mind when we're collaborating with people. Clearly, issues around low bandwidth or restricted connections can pop up. Some folks may be working at clients where if the firewall is extremely locked down, they may not be able to necessarily jump in and participate to the extent they want to. Some other challenges are certainly figuring out some better ways that we could work and collaborate, not just domestically, but even internationally, right? We've got folks spread all over the place. And one thing that I don't think comes to mind as often is just thinking about the ability to have folks, collaborate, while they're traveling, or, maybe they're on vacation, but they do want to jump in and, maybe they know there's a quick, 10 or 15 second answer to a problem somebody's having. When you think about just those kinds of situations, there's obviously a lot of kind of common ground with some fairly frequent challenges. The first one for sure is dealing with choppy audio and video. And that can happen on a variety of fronts. That could be something as simple as a bad connection off-site. It could also be just the network here being overloaded. There's a whole host of things that can happen. And this leads to a lot of kind of inequity in different conversations. Probably the biggest concern that I'm worried about the most is that this whole idea of remote pairing, it's often just ineffective. And when you think about the way that some folks may try to approach collaborating, if you're participating in a long, let's just say a 2 or 3 hour conversation of some kind, that's not exactly the most engaging thing to be a part of. I mean, I know, coding may not be the most exciting spectator sport, but when you're battling issues with, lag and, you're really trying to think about the problem at hand, let alone the logistics of just trying to, share some ideas. That's one of those things that we want to hopefully, refine and nail down as we go. Some other things too is that, a big part of joining meetings that are involving folks from the company, whether they're engineers or leadership or administrative, a lot of the kind of the really lively parts of the meeting just wind up getting lost because mics aren't present. And that can be a bit tricky. Along with that, screen sharing has its own problems. You can imagine, and I'm sure we've all experienced cases where we've tried screen sharing with other teams or colleagues, and I think in the best case, it's aggravating. I don't know if anybody here has had a really superb screen sharing experience that they really enjoy using. But, I'm always interested to see, well, what can we do to solve some of these issues? And hopefully we'll see in a bit some ideas to think about that. Another thing kind of related to the travel piece is that really, if you have folks that are offsite or just anywhere, it is almost impossible to just drop in and kind of participate on a project. If you think about having somebody, maybe you want them to look at the code base you're working on, screen sharing is kind of a hassle. They could go through the process of getting the project spun up, the repo cloned and all that stuff. But eventually you're going to wind up looking at something that, maybe it's just, enough friction to prevent them from really being able to have any meaningful impact. Another bigger problem too is trying to figure out, especially if you're not in the room, who's engaged with this conversation and who's actually listening. Somebody might be jumping in on these meetings off-site, and depending on things as simple as volume level or whatever, it may not be immediately apparent if the room is actually listening to what they're asking about, or even if it seems like the message is being received. This ties back into issues as well with when you get choppy bandwidth, some things certainly get lost. I think
Jeff, you awake?
No.
Sweet. And here we've got the volume boosted up a little bit too. So, if we have Jeff or Phil or anybody interjecting, we'll definitely get you. I think one more thing that's really important to consider too is that it really does take more energy to deal with remote pairing. You can imagine if you're going to sit there and, whether you're trying to like throw on some headphones or, really focus in on the conversation, it winds up being a bit taxing. So if you look at the current state of the world, I guess one of the things we can do is at least be happy that we tried, right? That's something. I do think though that, we're in a spot to maybe think about some other decent solutions here. So before we jump into the pairing part, one of the things I wanted to throw out there is, obviously we're using Slack for a lot of our solutions, and there definitely are some pros to how we're using it. Certainly having these conversations that can happen wherever is good, but I do think one of the kind of more challenging pieces is dealing with, Slack calls and that sort of thing. It just kind of seems like one of those things where they may be almost as intrusive or more intrusive than a regular phone call, especially if you're not expecting the conversation from somebody. So I would just kind of recommend, if we're going to, consider using that. I'm sure there are plenty of people that get value out of it. For me, I'm not totally thrilled, but whatever it takes to get our job done, right? It's the way to go. Secondly, we're using Zoom. And I think one of the things I want to toss out for this is that there really are a lot of features for this particular platform that we're really just not using. For example, we have the ability to give folks, toll-free numbers to dial into meetings if, maybe they can't access our, code or screen sharing. It also gives you the ability, if you just create a free account, to have as many meetings as you want that max out at about 45 minutes or so. And I don't know how many people have actually tried doing remote pairing, but for me, I think I found that somewhere between 38 and 45 minutes is kind of a good window before both parties probably need a break. Now, you might imagine if somebody's pairing with me, that window might be much shorter. It just all kind of depends. So one of the cool things that we have to work with is just being able to pair with VS Code. Now, I know for some folks thinking about using VS Code or Visual Studio might be a little bit more than something they're really interested in chasing, but I'm just going to ask for this presentation to just kind of free your mind a little bit and just think about some of the possibilities here.
Your GIF game is on point today, Rob.
Hey, thanks. That took a lot of work, So as far as getting started, biggest spoiler is, of course, VS Code or Visual Studio. Sorry if I ruined that for anybody. And the other thing is we just need to make sure that you have either a GitHub account or a Microsoft account. So one thing we're going to do is just... So we're just going to put Thatcher on the spot here, and I'm going to invite him to be a part of a demo for getting this started. So let me just share the full desktop here. Let's see. Yeah, Visual Studio Team Services is now Azure DevOps.
That's not this. VS Code is separate. I assume Rob's going to talk about some other further capabilities that are based on Azure DevOps, but this VS Code stuff doesn't require you to do anything. It doesn't require you to have an Azure DevOps account or anything like that. It's all you have to have is the GitHub account, which of course everybody has. So.
Yep. Cool. All right, so we're going to get started here. First thing I'm going to do is open up a sample repo, which I've got this project in place. So just running this locally, I'm going to go through and kick off the React application. So I'm going through this feature branch of mine and realizing that, oh, my bad. Let me switch over so you guys can see my desktop. Let's see, I believe it's the magic 3 dots, right, Jess? Maybe not. Ah. Got Ishan being the VJ here, which is awesome. Cool. Thanks, Ishan. So here we can see we've got this awesome dashboard going on, which may look familiar to those of you who were here for the drum machine / D3 presentation. So one thing that's kind of important is that I'm going through my code and my branch, and for whatever reason, I seem to have lost my header here. So I'm going to go into VS Code here. And let's see, we'll make sure we get the right project going. Okay, it's the wrong one. And basically, at this point, you can imagine I probably talked to Thatcher over Slack just to see if he's available. As luck turns out, he's right here, so he's excited to be participating in this awesome project.
Drive-by pairing.
So here, this is pretty uneventful, right? I've got my project opened in VS Code. I'm just kind of going through, looking at the actual structure so far. So far, all's good. I'm just going to go down here, and you'll see there's the Visual Studio Live Share that's a part and just installed now automatically with VS Code. So I'm just going to go into here, and I want to start a collaboration session. So I'm just going to go up here to the top. Cool. And now I can see that the link is copied to the clipboard there. So I'm going to go into Slack here and just send that to Thatcher. And then if we can switch over to his screen. We'll see what the experience looks like. Cool. So now it's just a matter of opening live share in VS Code. And this is pretty cool because you're able to share this link with a bunch of people. One thing that's really wild is that this live share allows up to 30 participants on a session.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it sure is. Cool. So let's see, did it pop in? Oh, we're doing the beauty of live demos, right? Sure. And I think one thing we should be able to do is just click on the live share. Yeah. Cool. So now if you go back to VS Code, I think we ought to be in good shape, hopefully. Yeah, okay. So we have the live share welcome page going on there. And now I believe if Thatcher looks at the Explorer view, we should see the project just at the top left. Yep. And let's see. All right, so we have group 2 is my project. Yeah, let's see what's in this live share one. Maybe I need to copy that link one more time.
I had the extension already. So maybe close VS Code and then
Could be. And worst case, if this doesn't work, there's always a fallback that we could try too.
my collaboration, I installed the live share tool probably like 8 months ago. So awesome.
Sure. All right, we're actually going to.
Try to reinstall it.
Can you just go to, there's an option on that one to join that session.
Cool. Hang on there, remote folks. We're going to bring in some more people here to the session. Yes.
So in this case, you're the host, like the host of the sharing program, right?
Yep.
So if you close VS Code, it's like the session ends. Does the session end?
You know, I haven't actually tried closing that out. I have tried just pairing with multiple people. Like the most that I have had in any given session has been 7, but I haven't actually tried closing mid-session. That's it.
The files that are modified are saved on your computer?
Correct. And one of the really nice benefits of using live share is that you don't have to have the other person, you know, configure their machine or clone the repo. They're able to just kind of peek in at your code directly.
Remote people are only hearing one side of this conversation.
Oh, the one mic should have worked. I wonder if it's dead. Sorry about that. The question was about, you know, when you're doing these sessions, what happens if you actually close out of VS Code entirely? And at that point, that's something I haven't really thought about. I do think the multiple user sharing, though, is a pretty awesome thing. So we'll see. My suspicion is that the whole thing just would die, just because, you it's being hosted specifically on and initiated from my machine. I suppose there might be a way to do like a handoff of some sort, but I bet that's probably a more advanced kind of usage. Remote folks, have you had a chance at all to explore any of this live sharing at all?
So I have come as far as installing it, but never really tried it.
Cool. Yeah, actually, let me post the collaboration link here in Slack so anybody who wants to join can. I'll post that in the Tech Talks channel. Let's see. And if any folks want to jump in, you can certainly be a part of the demo. Yeah, while we're getting this part set up, does anybody want to offer any thoughts as far as just remote pairing experiences and just kind of like maybe some challenges or successes you've had with it?
Yeah, when I heard you said that remote pairing takes a lot of energy and 45 minutes would be a nice unit of time, I agree completely. It's like you cannot do it all day. It drains your energy. But 45 minutes or maybe a little longer, it seems like a great measure.
Great. Yeah, I think, one of the things that we try to fit or want to deal with, right, is figuring out the best way that we can sort of share ideas without, having anyone feel kind of impeded, right? So as we can see in this example, we've got 2 folks that have joined the collaboration session. Now 3. Great. So yeah, if you want to take a look and see, like right now we're looking at my desktop and we've switched over to Thatcher's, I believe. Yep. Awesome. So if I'm running, like in this case, I do have a terminal up and running. If we go back to my display, we'll see that I have the ability to share different servers and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is just double check, make sure the app is running, which it is. And let's just go over here and we'll share a server. And so for me, I've got this running just on the, local host. And it doesn't matter about the display name. But now we can see the port. So now if we switch over to somebody else's machine, cool. So now everybody's able to see the server I'm working on. So I can go in there and play around with some code, as can anybody else. So if, for example, we go down into this examples with React folder, the first example, we go to this app.jsx file. We can do things like scroll through and see, it appears this section of code is commented out for the weather dashboard. So if Thatcher is able to just uncomment that and save it, we should see the changes reflected in my server. Cool. So you can see Thatcher made some changes, and we go through. Boom, there's the fix.
Nice React work there, Thatcher.
That's about the applause. Thanks.
And you can see, you can imagine this could be a really useful thing when you're just needing some extra eyes on a project. As I mentioned earlier, one of these huge benefits is just being able to see where people are in the project without them having to go and actually download and install the software. Another thing you can do is you can sort of follow each participant. So let's say I'm in this different file and I'm curious to see what Jess is up to. I can just follow and see where she's going and what changes she might be making to the code. Yeah. So if I go back to the live share and participants.
Control A, delete.
Yeah, so we can go through and follow to the side if we want. And maybe I want to keep in mind and see what she's doing. I can also go in and make changes to these other files as well. You can also do things like, maybe there's a case where I'm trying to do some crazy Git magic where, maybe I'm totally, out of my comfort zone and, I'd like somebody to help throw a set of eyes on it. You're able to go down into the shared terminals and do things like, as you might imagine, share the terminal that you have already. So I could live dangerously here and give read-write permission. Here you can imagine this is a bit dangerous, but at least people can go in and sort of poke around and check out different things. Luckily, though, that command's not going to work without the magic password. So,
you're not typing.
nope, I am not typing.
You should say that.
Yeah, you can see here, like we've got a bunch of. Jess is trying to commandeer my system here. So we can also do things like, I can boot Jess from the session. So now we just have Carlos and Thatcher, which of course is probably going to lead to a fun discussion in our one-on-one, I'm sure. But you'll see this is really cool. You can imagine a case where maybe you've got a project fired up on a pairing station and you just want to have somebody jump in. There's also the huge benefit of, if everybody in the session is using VS Code, it doesn't mess with their display settings.
I was going to note that if you change back to my screen, you would see that it's using my color scheme, which is different than Rob's. So yeah, you get your own local preferences. Yeah, even if you're clearly different.
Yeah, and really, this has been a really handy tool. I would encourage you to, if you get a chance to just poke around, it's kind of fun to see what's possible in terms of sharing servers. You can see, even though we had a little bit of a hiccup kind of getting started, even that wasn't really a deal breaker from my perspective as far as trying to get some pairing software and stuff going. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and get back to the slide deck. Thank you all for joining in the session there and for not deleting all my files. I appreciate that.
It wasn't for not trying.
Yeah, as Jeff said, it wasn't for not trying, but that was pretty cool. So let me go. As I see Jess wound up crashing my app, but luckily it's a throwaway branch, so that's fine. Nope, I'm sharing momentarily. Oh, there we go. And I'm just getting the slide deck shared. Cool. So that was pretty awesome, right? So this kind of opens the door for thinking about some other possible solutions in terms of pairing and thinking about how we might work with some things. And one thing I thought was cool was Thatcher and I had a passing conversation where we were both sort of thinking about the same thing, just kind of exploring the idea of shared virtual machines for code and projects. And Thatcher wanted to.
The reason I thought of it, it's not like an original. We did explored this a few months ago, and then I noticed in the release notes for a new version of VS Code, they talked about optimizing it for the use case where the one workspace was shared by multiple people by them remoting into a VM, and that's becoming more common because then the VM becomes part of the project artifacts. Whatever's set up in there is part of the repo rather than being something that just exists on like a given pairing workstations.
And I think one of the cool things about just thinking about these VMs in general, kind of agreeing with what Thatcher was saying, is not only do we get those custom environments, but we could actually, have our own machines that we can turn on and off, as we want to. Typically some, fairly standard VMs, I think probably if they're running 24/7, or I would imagine around like the 50-ish a month range. But, certainly it doesn't make sense to, leave a bunch of VMs hot if nobody's using them or working on them. And if you think about the, projects where maybe we're doing concept apps, maybe we're doing something where the client request is they want to know that this machine is locked down. Maybe it's not sufficient that the code's on a pairing station, that it is actually on this, VM that access can be audited for. We have better tracking on our end for who's, working with code and shared secrets, that sort of thing. It also frees us up to consider some things that, I don't know if we've had projects in the past with like data analytics, for example, but you might imagine a case where, for this particular client, it makes sense to have this BPVM and, maybe some cloud TensorFlow units where if they're running 24/7, can give you a bill of about $3,200 a month. But as you might imagine, there's a whole lot of processing power, and certainly like any cloud resource, you're probably not going to leave a lot of those lit up and running all the time. But what if I told you there was one more thing to think about? We saw some of the kind of cool opportunities with pairing using VS Code. There's also projects out there that let you run VS Code on the VM itself. This particular one, it's cut up there at the top, but it's a project called Code Server. And here you can see we've got just like a basic setup. This gives you the benefit of, not only could we remote in from our, laptops or pairing stations, but somebody could feasibly connect through, their smartphone or tablet also, which would be super cool to play with. They have some guides here for getting started using this as a SSH. Certainly creating your own Docker container. There's a link that I found that I forgot to include in the deck here, because making links is hard. But I'll post that in the Tech Talks chat later. And it was a really quick video on just using this with Google Cloud and having a VM that you could access, basically accessing VS Code in a web browser. Thatcher?
I think we should literally take an action item to try that, especially because we've now got a way to give people access to AWS through Jump Cloud, which makes it way easier than having to hand out creds manually. So we should give it a shot. I want to let you finish because there are a couple of other options too that we haven't dove into, but you may have already looked at them. So I'm going to let you finish.
Actually, this would be a good time to punt to Thatcher.
What are you trying to say, Rob?
That was a perfect segue.
Okay, so there are other services that are kind of trying to look at this problem. One is Cloud9, which is an AWS product, and it's literally a VM. So when you create a workspace in Cloud9, it's literally a VM that multiple people connect to. The editor itself, by default, is essentially a web application in your browser. Ben and I played around with it in the context of doing some work for Smartsheet, and Ben is pointing his thumb at the ground, and I concur. If you had no other option, it would be better than nothing. But of course, it doesn't deal with audio channel or anything like that, just like VS Code doesn't. Jess, you were going to say something?
I just browsed that VS Code sharer help file, and there is an audio extension for VS Code.
Microsoft, going to Microsoft. So that's one option. There's another one too that I actually forget off the top of my head. That Red Hat recently bought a startup that had essentially a shared coding environment. That of course is probably a lot more agnostic than AWS is. So there are options. People are competing to kind of solve this problem. I think we should dig into them a little bit. I'd love to do the VM thing just because one concern I have is when projects are tied to individual pairing workstations, I mean, it's fine to say, and I think it's a reasonable goal to say, hey, anybody should be able to pull the repo and with the documentation in the repo, stand up the project in 15 minutes. That has never been true of, say, politics. It took hours to set up, typically. It would be really, I feel like it would make us much more nimble if we had the ability to literally pass a VM around, have multiple people connect to it if they wanted to, but also pull a copy of it and run it locally, which you can do of just the whole VM. So I encourage people to dig into this a little bit and play around. I think there'd be some fun stuff that we could learn how to do. So.
And I think too, I'd be curious to see how the pairing winds up, impacting folks that might be, international. I know, for example, with the VS Code stuff in particular, I've actually worked with a few friends that are over in Germany. So the chat and latency and all that stuff seem to be fine in that case. Be curious to see what other, experiences people might have in other locales.
Does VS Code recognize that you're working with people in Germany and automatically start playing Rammstein in the audio channel?
Not yet, but I bet there's probably an extension somebody could write that would really amp that up a little bit. Cool. Well, that's all I had. Thank you very much.